All empires say the same thing: our money is safe. Every government swears that its promises will last forever, and every time history quietly shakes its head and proves them wrong. From Rome to France, from the Confederacy to modern-day Lebanon, people have woken up one morning and faced a terrifying reality. Their savings had become worthless. Their salaries had lost all meaning. And the future they believed was secure vanished overnight. Let's accept an uncomfortable truth. Collapse is not rare. Collapse is the rule. The real question is not whether financial systems will fail. The real question is what you will do when they do. Most people make the same mistake. They look at their bank accounts, trust their national currency, believe in institutions, and assume all of it is solid as rock. But money is not rock. Money is trust, and trust can disappear overnight. That is why history is both brutal and incredibly valuable. Every collapse leaves traces behind, patterns, warnings, lessons. It shows what truly protects wealth and what turns to dust. And if you pay attention, you'll notice this. The survivors were never the ones who trusted the most. They were the ones who doubted first. Think of the Byzantine Empire. It is usually remembered as the eastern half of Rome, surviving for nearly 1,000 years after the Western Empire fell. At the heart of its economy was the gold solidus. It was so trusted that merchants across Europe, the Middle East, and even Asia accepted it without question. For centuries, it was the closest thing the medieval world had to a global reserve currency. You would think they learned from Rome's silver denarius disaster, when emperors kept debasing the coin until it became little more than tin coated with silver. We've told that story before. But no. Centuries later, the Byzantines made the same mistake with gold. They reduced its purity, mixed in cheaper metals, stretched the coin thinner and thinner. At first no one noticed. Then trust broke, and when trust breaks, everything collapses. The coin that once held Mediterranean trade together suddenly became a political fairy tale. The economy lost its stability. Trust evaporated. So what survived? Not paper promises, not imperial decrees, not laws. Those who quietly hoarded real gold. Those who owned land beyond the empire's reach. They preserved their wealth. Everyone else watched their money melt away. This is the first timeless lesson. Governments can never resist the temptation to dilute money, and when they do, real value flees to assets they cannot counterfeit. But not every collapse begins with rulers manipulating money. Sometimes the blow comes from an unexpected direction. In the mid-14th century, Europe faced the most devastating pandemic in its history, the Black Death. Between 1347 and 1351, nearly half of Europe's population died. Half. Cities emptied, villages disappeared, trade collapsed. But the economic side of the story was more complex than most people realize. Because when half the labor force vanished, labor became valuable. Survivors could demand higher wages. Land and food became abundant compared to people. Families with silver, goods, or simply the ability to work suddenly gained an advantage they never imagined. Land that once cost a fortune sold for next to nothing. Homes were abandoned. Fields went unplowed. For the survivors, it became a true buyer's market. If this sounds familiar, it should. During the COVID period, we saw a modern version of this. Supply chains broke down. Governments printed trillions to keep the system alive. The result? Asset prices soared. Those with liquidity accumulated homes, stocks, and companies. Those living paycheck to paycheck fell even further behind. Pandemics don't just take lives. They redistribute wealth. They always have. Then there is Florence in the 1300s, the financial capital of Europe, home to powerful banking families like the Bardi and Peruzzi. They lent enormous sums to kings. Their biggest mistake was the massive loans given to King Edward III of England. When Edward stopped paying his debts, the banks collapsed, deposits vanished, trade froze. People who trusted institutions deemed too big to fail learned the hard way that size is not safety. This lesson never disappeared. From Florence to Lehman Brothers in 2008, to Lebanese banks in 2019. Institutions exist to protect themselves, not you. The American Civil War is another forgotten financial disaster. Both sides printed money to fund the war. In the North, greenbacks slowly lost value. In the South, graybacks collapsed entirely. When the war ended, Confederate money was dead. People carried sacks of cash just to buy a loaf of bread. What mattered was not paper, it was land. food, gold, anything real. The French Revolution delivered the same lesson. The assignats were supposed to save the economy. Instead, uncontrolled printing destroyed trust. Farmers refused paper money. Bread riots returned. Savings were wiped out. Then came the 1997 Asian financial crisis. Foreign currency debt. The illusion of fixed exchange rates. Collapse overnight. Savings evaporated. Jobs disappeared. Assets were sold for pennies to foreigners. And then Lebanon. Banks locked their doors. People could not access their own money. The currency lost more than 90% of its value. Doctors, engineers, retirees, everyone who trusted the system was wiped out. So, what does history tell us? There is no single magical solution. Sometimes it's gold, sometimes land, sometimes liquidity, sometimes skills, sometimes simply getting out before the doors close. But the theme is always the same. Blind trust is deadly. And here is the paradox most people miss. Collapse is not just destruction. It is a transfer, from paper to reality, from trust to preparation, from passive savers to active producers. The true survivors were not just those who held assets. They were the useful ones, those who could produce, repair, feed, build. In crises, money loses meaning. Production never does. So the real question is not whether everything will collapse. It will. The real question is this: will you be left holding promises? Or something real? If this narrative changed how you see history, subscribe, and like and comment. History already gave us the answers. I'm just showing you where to look.